Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, November 11th, 2025. Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski will be here with us just a moment. What's coming I almost said in Vietnam. Okay. What's coming in Venezuela? Another Vietnam-style war? But first this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 37 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Lear Capital to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure, and that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Colonel Karen, and the audience should know that backstage we call you Colonel Sunshine because you're always sunny and happy no matter what we're talking about. But Colonel Karen, welcome here. Of course, before we get to the U.S. military off the coast of Venezuela and whether that's going to produce another Vietnam-type disaster, how bad off, as you understand it, is the Ukraine military as we speak? Professor Deason was just on telling us that they're really on their last legs and are engaged in a horrific form of conscription where they're actually yanking people out of young men out of their homes. It's one thing to yank somebody off the street or from a bar or a nightclub, but they're actually banging down front doors and taking these kids out of their homes, putting them in uniforms and putting them to the front lines.
Yeah, I mean, Angelina Jolie could answer that question for you. You know, she visited Kharkiv, and one of her Ukrainian-born security men was grabbed. And there was nothing that she could do about it, even though she represents the UN and she's a big pop star and has a lot of money. She could not get him returned. He is wearing a uniform now of the Ukrainian military. So, and he hasn't been in Ukraine, recently. He happened to come back because she wanted to make a visit. And yeah, they need people badly, and they're losing people badly, of course. And we've kind of been tracking this for a long time. We've seen the nature of that war. They call it a meat grinder, and most of the meat that's being ground is the Ukrainian youth. So, I don't know. The progress on the ground kind of tells you what's happening. And the latest, I forget the name of the towns, Pokrovsk or whatever. There's a couple, but the Russians offered to cease fire and have journalists come and interview and see what was happening, and that was denied. And at this point now, they're either taking prisoners or trying to escape. There's not much left there. So the Ukraine military is in a retreat now, and it's in more of a retreat now, I think, than it was even 6 months ago when, many of us have been talking about this for a long time. But yeah, they remain in retreat.
I'm not a fan of Angelina Jolie. I have nothing against her. It's just not a genre that I
sure
really follow. I know she had this famous divorce with Brad Pitt and all that. But whatever she was trying to do there, this had to be a horrible failure. This guy's born in Ukraine, lived in the U.S., accompanies her as a security guard to Ukraine, and they kidnap him?
Yeah. And she may have been, and maybe her people don't pay attention to what's happening. That's very possible. Not everybody pays attention to everything. But I had the strong feeling that they didn't expect this to happen. They were shocked that this happened. And I think most likely she and her team were shocked when they said, "Oh, he's with me. He's part of my team. You need to give him back." They did not do that. And I think that's very interesting. I mean, and that also indicates the kind of the desperation. But as bad as it is for the soldiers in Ukraine and their military losing this slow and long and needless war, We have the corruption in Kiev. We have the tyranny in the capital cities. We have the tyranny of Zelensky's rule, non-democratic at this point. This has also been increasing just as the military is being beat to death. So it's bad news for Ukraine. It seems for academically that there could be a peaceful solution designed on paper and implemented. It seems like at this point, why couldn't we stop that war? I'm kind of with Trump on this in a tiny way. He says it shouldn't take this long to stop the war. I agree with that. But it does. And we're at fault because the guy we sponsored is the guy that seems to be holding up any type of peaceful end to this thing.
Wow. Another disaster coming is the planned theft, you can't make this up, of Russian government assets deposited in European banks. Now, I asked Professor Deason if the EU elites who are contemplating this have told Trump, I don't know that it makes any difference what he says, but I would like to know if he supports the theft of these assets. Apparently, nearly all the Europeans do, except the Prime Minister of Belgium, who gave a speech which could have been given by Thomas Jefferson about the value of private property. So I don't know if this is going to happen. Much of the money is in Belgium, but not all of it. You ever seen anything like this?
Well, this is what happens in actual wars. I mean, a hot war, you don't hold your enemy's currency sacrosanct. You don't respect your enemy's property rights. Okay. So it's like the European leadership, the EU leadership, and a lot of the elected leaders in the European countries. It's like they believe and are acting or behaving as if they're in a real war. But the strange thing is they're not in a real war. They're in a made-up war. If they were in a real war, they would have already lost. There's no sustainable military capability in Europe to fight a war. And they really should be thanking Ukraine for doing the dirty work, because Ukraine has actually stood and fought and suffered the war that they keep celebrating. But they're behaving as if they're involved in a big war. Yeah, sure, Europe started it, but they instigated it. They've fanned the flames of war, but they're behaving as if they can play war with other people's money and other people's property, and it's not gonna cause a problem. So I think they're deluded, certainly. But the other thing is, and I'm sure many of the Europeans, except for the Belgian guy, are not thinking. Most of them are not thinking about the impact of what that means. If you are holding property for somebody and you refuse to give it back at some point because you've changed your mind and you never give it back, well, guess what? You'll never hold their property again, number one. Number two, a powerful enemy or a powerful property owner who had that happen to him once is also going to seek ways to restore that value. Okay, so maybe today or tomorrow, Russia loses these billions of dollars, have it stolen by Europe. And maybe they can't do anything today or tomorrow, but they will be able to do something someday, and they will remember that. So you're shooting yourself in the foot, quite frankly. And I think any rational person knows this. The fact that they are encouraging, now maybe they're just really desperate for money. They've lost their mind. It's going to be a cold winter. I don't know. They want this money. But when you steal, there are consequences. And those consequences for Europe will be an acceleration of Europe's decline for sure.
Will there be any consequences to the presidential embrace of al-Julani, the former al-Qaeda head chopper and hand chopper, who's now the nominal president of Syria, who was embraced by the White House yesterday?
Well, I mean, I think Donald Trump is playing games that he doesn't understand, and he's being used by people who do understand them a little bit better. But, this idea that we're going to be friends with Syria and we're going to use our former enemy and suddenly we transform them from a terrorist with a $10 million bounty on his head to suddenly he is welcome in the White House and he is a friend. He is wearing Western dress. He's one of us now, and we're going to put a military base in Damascus or south of Damascus. So, Trump is he's like George Bush almost, the Bush 43, but at least Bush's father understood a little bit about the world. But yeah, Trump is.
We're going to put a military base in Damascus. Wait a minute.
That's
we have over 750 military bases around the world. We have to build another one?
Yeah, we don't have one in Damascus. So I guess they're going to, that's what they're talking about doing. And of course, he's also continuing with the oil. And I remember Trump from his first term, he was very honest about the fact that we were stealing Syrian oil. And he tried to remove the troops that were protecting the Americans who were taking that oil. He tried to say, we really shouldn't do that. I got the impression that he thought we should not steal Syrian oil. So come around, how many years later he's elected again. It's not even the end of his first year. He is embracing the continued extraction of that oil. So in terms of oil, in terms of natural resources, a lot of people have died. We have a terrorist in charge that we now treat as our new best friend, but nothing has really changed in terms of extraction of resources. Nothing has really changed in terms of America's fundamental foreign policy of, I don't know if you call it imperialism, but certainly resource theft, gaining resource advantage. So in some ways, Trump proves himself to be identical to every previous president in my lifetime in terms of his policy. And that's very disappointing for people that thought Trump might be a breath of fresh air based on America First, based on the idea of focusing on our problems. But no, he's not doing that.
Here's somebody else who thought that Trump would be a breath of fresh air, and she's rather disappointed by him. The maverick congresswoman from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'll read what she said. The new leader of Syria is a former al-Qaeda terrorist wanted by our government who was meeting with President Trump today. She wrote this yesterday at the White House on the U.S. Marines' 250th anniversary. He rose to power in December 2024. Sanctions were lifted off Syria in June, and many Christians and minority groups have been killed before and after the sanctions were lifted. Syria is the oldest home of Christianity outside of Israel. The Apostle Paul met Jesus on the road to Damascus. We all know that story. I pray the persecution ends not only in Syria, but all around the world. And then she complains that she wishes he would meet with domestic leaders. Would have been nice if he had sat down with leaders in Congress to see if something could have been worked out, and the government shutdown didn't last as long as it did. I sort of like government shutdowns. They don't spend all that money, but a lot of innocent people suffered as a result of it. But there she is turning around. I think she represents a chunk of the MAGA base when she says things like that. Don't you, Colonel?
There's no doubt that she represents a chunk of the MAGA base. And that is absolutely what she's expecting is what almost every MAGA voter, and that's independents, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, all these. She is describing what we were told we were getting, what we expected to get, and what Trump spent a lot of energy reinforcing to us that this was going to happen. And not even 10 months in office, and he's building new bases. He hasn't closed any bases that I'm aware of. He's picking fights, obviously, with Venezuela, but also in the Pacific, where we certainly are writing, checks we can't cash over there. So, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a betrayal, and I'm glad she's standing up to say it, because any person who has followed MAGA messaging and has followed Donald Trump and it's been a conservative or someone on the conservative side, they know that what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying is 100% true. 100% true.
My friend and former colleague Jillian Turner at Fox News interviewed Al-Jilani live and actually asked him about 9/11, Chris Cut number 11.
Do you, Mr. President, have regrets that al-Qaeda carried out those attacks that killed 3,000 Americans?
I was only 19 years old, so I was a very young person, and it didn't have any decision-making power at that time. And I don't have anything to do with it. And Al-Qaeda was not present right then in my area. So you're speaking to the wrong person about this subject.
We're asking the wrong person about this subject. He did not say that 2 years earlier when a similar question was put to him. Cut number 13.
What did you think and feel on 9/11 at the time?
Anyone who lived in the Islamic or Arab world at the time who tells you he wasn't happy about it would be lying.
Go.
Yeah, well, he's actually being honest also. I mean, cagey about not being part of Al-Qaeda, but, among the global perspective that Al-Qaeda did 9/11, that's not widely shared. And certainly bin Laden did not take credit for it, said specifically that he didn't do it. So if you think about the American line, this is an Al-Qaeda attack on the United States back, 23 years ago. Many people in the Arab world wouldn't even believe that anyway. So he very smartly put distance between himself and Al-Qaeda in the current sense. But there's no doubt. There is absolutely no doubt. He was 19. He remembers. So I was 40 something, and I remember there were cheers across the Middle East and many other parts of the world when that happened.
There were cheers in Jersey City across the Hudson River.
Those were the kind of cheers we don't like to mention. Yeah, the Israelis were cheering it.
Correct.
Was very much he said this is the greatest day for Israel, and then they said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Oh well, because now Americans will be inclined to understand what we in Israel have to put up with." He backed down, but there was cheering all over from that, and I'm sure even Silverstein wasn't too unhappy that he didn't have to spend all that money to get rid of the asbestos in those towers. Very, very.
You're speaking of the landlord of the World Trade Towers who had a serious
the luckiest
asbestos
guy.
problem on his hands.
Absolutely the luckiest guy.
And when the 9/11 litigation dust settled, no pun intended, but dust settled, Silverstein walked away with a check for $7 billion.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the case because of this guy Al-Jilani in the White House. I'm thinking of the people who were prosecuted, the Americans prosecuted during the Bush administration for joining Al-Qaeda. You remember the case of John Walker Lind? They found the guy in some horrible circumstance. They thought he was Middle Eastern. It turns out he was American. They shipped him back here. He's in jail for 20 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's
working for a guy that is now being embraced in the White House.
Yeah, that's incredible. In a normal world, that would be horrendous. That would be a cause of great shame. That would be our Justice Department would be up in arms about the injustice of that. But we don't live in a normal world. Trump is busy shooting fishermen and unemployed Venezuelans that are doing different things on the water, some of which might entail some drug transport, but not to the United States, and certainly not fentanyl or anything like that. And he's killing them. And he doesn't even know who their name. We don't know who they are. They were people, and now they're fish food, and it's okay because Trump is, I don't know. This is the world we live in. It's unacceptable. And if it continues much longer, he's going to accelerate not just the division in this country, but really the failure, the collapse of this country.
Before I ask you about American warships off the coast of Venezuela, here's what President Trump said about himself and his popularity at a Veterans Day rally in Washington, D.C., where it's also bitter cold, earlier today.
Veterans, we have a 92% approval rating. We took that up from 38% from a certain previous administration that we won't mention.
CNN, of course, ran the latest poll average, which shows 28%. I don't know what he's talking about, 92%.
Maybe he's referring to the Republican Jewish meeting that was just held. The Republican Jewish
where Mark Levin
Mark Levin went crazy.
Caused people to walk out. Oh, well.
Yeah. But
what are U.S. warships doing off the coast of Venezuela? And is the United States going to end up in another Vietnam War?
Well, let's hope that it doesn't. That would be well, a false flag could do it. Yes. I mean, I would think that more rational minds will prevail. But yeah, if there's a false flag or something happens to one of our ships, he's ready. He's poised and ready. Trump is to attack, to bomb, to harm Venezuela. It would be worse than Vietnam in many ways, because Vietnam had some allies, obviously, when the Chinese helped, and maybe the Russians gave a friendly nod, but all of Central and much of South America will ally with Venezuela against an unwarranted attack. And this is a different world weapons-wise, and wars are fought differently. In Vietnam, we didn't have drones launched from Mexico on behalf of the Vietnamese war effort into that. We didn't have that. We didn't see that. We didn't have that technology, and it wasn't that kind of a war. But a war against Venezuela would entail counterattacks, and those counterattacks would be much as we talk about with the war on terror, that things can happen in this country. Most of them never did unless the FBI made them happen. But if we went to war in our hemisphere for no reason other than to take the oil or to prove a point that we don't like Maduro, that would have ramifications that certainly Trump can't imagine, but I can, and I think a lot of other people can. So it needs to be avoided. And the fact that he's got so much of our military down there already, it's an accident waiting to happen.
Will Russia aid Venezuela?
Lavrov said that they would not, or that they have not been asked to. It's hard to think that they wouldn't assist them in some ways, but Russia is not interested. This kind of proves the point of Russia going to France or taking over London. They don't want to expand. They're busy just trying to take care of Russia. So I would think that they would not, but we don't need Russia's help directly or even indirectly. The Venezuelans and their neighbors and the world there's so many things in the toolkit to make Americans' life utterly miserable if we launch a war that's unwarranted, that makes no sense, that's clearly driven by greed and arrogance and pride. With or without Russia's help, I don't think it's going to matter. But I don't think Russia's going to stick their hand in it. I mean, they have been very restrained in getting involved in other people's issues. Same with China. I don't think China would do it. So I hope Trump doesn't see this as, oh, what a great opportunity, because it is a disaster in the making. If he would do it, well, we got 3 more years. I'm not sure what Trump is capable of. It's very concerning.
He's capable of whatever he can get away with politically.
Yeah.
Shoot from the hip and get away with whatever you can politically. Colonel Kwiatkowski, a pleasure, my dear friend. We've been all over the place, and I appreciate you letting me, in terms of the various topics we've discussed, and I appreciate you letting me do that. I also appreciate your accommodation of my schedule. Thank you so much, Karen. All the best. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely. Thanks, Judge.
Thank you. And coming up today at 3 o'clock, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.